And it's always remarkable how often when I leave the US, and I do go to Europe, and I do go to Japan, and I do go to other jurisdictions, how much they envy the 401k system that we have here in the United States.
This is 401k Specialist Editor-in-Chief Brian Anderson, and this is the 401k Specialist Podcast. Today, we're honored to have as our guest Eric J. Pan, President and CEO of the Investment Company Institute, the leading association representing regulated funds globally, and one of the most influential interest groups shaping financial services policy around mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, and unit investment trusts. He was also recently named chair of the International Investment Funds Association, a global organization whose members are made up of national and regional associations representing the investment funds industry that collectively manage more than $77 trillion in jurisdictions around the world. Welcome to the 401k Specialist Podcast, Eric.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
All right. Well, at 401k Specialist, we recently covered a brand new campaign that ICI launched this month called Help Us Retire, kind of a clever play on words with the us being U.S. as in help the United States retire. As I understand it, one of the goals behind it is to ensure that the tax treatment Americans rely on for retirement savings isn't eroded and used as a pay-for to finance other government spending or tax changes. What can you tell us about this new campaign?
Well, you've put it very well already. Earlier this month, ICI did launch the Help Us Retire campaign. And the retirement system here in the United States, one that we've enjoyed for decades, is really based on people being able to put money in 401ks, but also investment retirement accounts and other long-term saving vehicles. One reason why a lot of people do participate is because our tax code incentivizes people to put money away. And this is a formula that works. It's tremendously successful. It's a model for countries around the world, and it's something that we should be proud of. Here at ICI, we recognize that with President Trump's election, 2025 is a very important year in Congress because taxes will be one of the big issues they will need to debate. And we want to make sure that as Congress considers changes to our tax code, that retirement savings doesn't become a bargaining chip, that the tax treatment that serves Americans' retirement doesn't end up becoming sacrificed in order to be a pay-for other initiatives that Congress may be interested in paying for. So really, the Help Us Retire campaign is about reminding everybody, policymakers, average Americans, about how important it is that we continue to encourage Americans to save for the long term.
All right. We certainly wish you the best with that new campaign, as we know how important it is to protect the tax treatment of retirement savings vehicles. Now, I do want to move on to the new Trump administration in Washington. Obviously, lots of big changes happening, and I'm curious as to what ICI is really keeping a close eye on regarding any potential policy changes that could impact retirement savers.
So we think that the new SEC, currently led by Mark Ueda, who's the acting chair, but eventually it'll be Paul Atkins, who's been nominated by the president to be the new SEC chair. Ueda, Atkins, but also Hester Peirce are all well known to the SEC. They've all served at the SEC for many years. And from the ICI perspective, they are incredibly thoughtful regulators who understand the markets. And therefore, we are very optimistic that under their leadership, the SEC will be looking at how to make sure that our regulatory system protects investors, but also promotes capital formation, which is part of the SEC mandate. The past 4 years under Chair Gensler, the SEC has focused on a number of priorities that we at ICI have questioned as to whether or not they were the right priorities. So we are hopeful that under Chair Atkins's lead, that the SEC will draw its attention on initiatives that really will have a positive impact on Americans' access to new investments, the use of funds, and growing markets. So, the short story is, I think this is a very exciting time. It's a time where we think that the SEC has the potential to do a number of very positive things.
All right. Well, when it comes to what's become a long legislative battle to get collective investment trusts allowed in 403B plans, as they are in 401ks, would you expect that this is something that might finally happen in 2025?
I do, because we were talking about the Help Us Retire campaign, and we were talking about the tax debate, and I think that there is genuine interest in Congress. It stems from the original Secure 2.0 passage that happened, of course, in the last administration, that there is genuine interest in Congress about how do we actually ensure financial security for Americans. And when we talk about financial security, a big part of that is retirement security. And the 403B issue with respect to CITs is really about leveling the playing field. It's a recognition that we want Americans to be able to use a variety of investment products, any type of investment, whether it be through CITs or whether it be through mutual funds or ETFs, is a positive for the American economy and for American families. So I think that the key that we can never forget is investment is a good thing, and we should be always looking for ways to encourage investment. Any policy that ends up creating barriers or artificially restricts how Americans invest is something that we should not support, and we really should question.
All right. Well, beyond what you've talked about so far, what are some of ICI's other top policy priorities in 2025, particularly as they relate to expanding retirement coverage and improving retirement outcomes?
So I think a lot of our priorities are, how do you make the system work better? And that means, first, giving people access to a broader list of investments. So in that front, I think we should have a conversation about public market investments, but also whether or not people should have greater access to private market investments. It's about, how do we ensure that we continue to provide investment services at good cost to investors. And that goes to, is our regulatory system allowing fund managers and asset managers to provide services in a cost-effective manner? And that includes looking at things like e-delivery, for example, something that would save a lot of money and would not harm investors. In fact, it would enhance the investing experience. So I think that there's a number of things that ICI is very focused on, both with the SEC and in Congress, also the Internal Revenue Service, that is all geared to, again, as I said before, encouraging people to invest, looking at what today makes it harder for people to invest or makes it more expensive for them to invest, and trying to address those issues so that people actually will put money into long-term savings.
Great. All right. Well, before we wrap this up, are there any other issues that we haven't touched on yet? Anything else on your radar that you'd care to comment about?
Well, I mean, I would just note that one reason why it's great to speak to you, Brian, is because your publication does focus on, as in your name, the 401k system. And I guess I would just conclude by, again, reminding people how remarkable the system is. You had mentioned at the very beginning of my intro that, I am the new chair of the International Investment Funds Association, and ICI, we do work not only in the United States, but also in Europe and Asia. And it's always remarkable how often when I leave the US, and I do go to Europe, and I do go to Japan, and I do go to other jurisdictions, how much they envy the 401k system that we have here in the United States. And I think that we as Americans should feel very lucky for this system and really understand what a jewel it is for our economy to have this defined contribution system based on 401ks and other instruments. So here, I guess I give a hat tip to to you and your colleagues at your publication for kind of helping that debate continue, but also just having these podcasts and allowing us to talk about it.
All right. Well, that's great to hear. Great to hear about the respect for the 401k system. Eric J. Pan, President and CEO of the Investment Company Institute. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights on the 401k Specialist podcast.